We just closed up for the night. The espresso machine was winding down. I had just flipped the open sign to closed and pulled the blinds halfway. We were talking about the smell of roasted coffee beans and old vinyl that lingered, how the coffee reminded us of my late parents, and how the vinyl reminded him of being a young man in the 50s when he ran the store. Grandpa was behind the counter, wiping down the espresso machine like it was a rare antique, humming something old and jazzy under his breath. He always hummed while he cleaned. Same tune every night, something from Ella or Miles or Billy. He never told me what the song was, but I was always glad to see the light that being here in his old store brought into his eyes. We'd spent months bringing this place back to life. It used to be his pride and joy, back when it was just a record shop tucked into the corner of a quiet block. When the world stopped buying vinyl, he boarded it up and let the dust settle. But when my dad passed, after losing my mom in childbirth, I decided to move in with him and take my dad's place taking care of him. And we decided to give it one more life. This time, not just records, but coffee and conversation. We were just finishing up when the bell above the door jingled. It was a small sound, soft, delicate, but it cut through everything. Grandpa paused mid-wipe. I turned. She stepped inside with the rain still clinging to her coat. Her hair was damp, curling slightly at the ends, and her cheeks were flushed from the cold. She looked around as though she wasn't quite sure she belonged. Eyes wide, like maybe she'd walked into a dream instead of a cafe. And for a second, it felt like she had. We both stood there, stupidly still. Me because I'd never seen anyone like her. And Grandpa, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. His rag slipped from his hand and landed on the counter. "My God," he whispered. His voice wasn't just shocked, it was cracked, like it had fallen through a memory he hadn't touched in years. "She looks just like her." I glanced at him, confused. But he didn't say anything else. He just kept staring. Meanwhile, she stepped forward, eyes darting to the records. The dim lighting, the half-swept floor. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft. "I saw the lights and I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just walking home and—" "Not at all," I cut in, finding my voice. "You're welcome. We're technically closed, but we haven't locked up yet." I paused. "Coffee?" She smiled, relieved, uncertain, the corners of her lips curling like the start of a song. "I'd love one." Grandpa nodded silently, still staring. Eventually, he turned and disappeared into the back. I watched him go, then turned back to her. "Take a seat anywhere," I said. She chose a table near the window, shrugging off her coat and folding it over the chair. Her clothes were simple, faded denim, an oversized sweater, but she had a kind of effortless grace. The kind that artists try to capture but never quite manage. As I prepared the coffee, I kept glancing at her, half afraid she'd vanish. She didn't. She sat, watching the rain roll down the glass outside, fingertips tracing lazy circles on the tabletop. I brought the coffee over, just black, for now. She didn't seem the type to complicate things with foam and syrup. "Thank you," she said. Her fingers wrapped around the mug like it was something sacred. "You're welcome." I hesitated. "Do you like jazz?" She looked up, eyes lighting. "I love jazz. My grandmother used to play it all the time. She said it was music for when your heart feels too big." I smiled. "Your grandmother sounds wise." She was. She sipped her coffee, then glanced around the space. "This place, it feels like a secret." "It sort of is," I said. "It used to be my grandfather's vinyl shop. We just reopened as a cafe." "I'm glad you did," she said. "Places like this make the world feel slower." We talked. About music first, how she loved Nina Simone and had a soft spot for old blues. Then books. She confessed to reading children's literature, even as an adult. "They're full of truth," she said, "but they say it gently." I told her I liked that. She told me she was an illustrator. We laughed when the rain grew louder and joked that it was trying to compete with the music. I asked her name, Isla. It suited her. Time passed unnoticed. The clock ticked. The records changed. The coffee cooled. Grandpa didn't return to the front, but I knew he was listening from the back, as he always did when something mattered. Eventually, she glanced at her phone and sighed. I should go. I stood as she gathered her coat. She paused near the door, brushing a curl behind her ear. Thank you for the coffee and the company. Any time, I said, truly. She smiled again, and this time, it reached all the way to her eyes. Then she opened the door and stepped into the night. The rain had lightened, just barely. She didn't rush. As the door swung shut, the little bell jingled again. Grandpa came out a moment later, his eyes distant. He picked up the rag he'd dropped earlier and said quietly, She could have been her twin. The resemblance is uncanny. Who? I asked. He didn't answer right away, just looked at the door. Her name was Elsie, he said at last. My first love. She married someone else. I looked at him, and he looked at me, and there was something shared in that silence. A weight, a wonder. Then he nodded to the coffee pot. Pour me one too, will you? Looks like we might be opening late tomorrow. And I smiled, because I knew she'd be back. The days after Isla first walked through the cafe door stretched long and uncertain. I kept looking up every time the bell above the entrance chimed, hoping it was her. Each time it wasn't, a little hope peeled away. Maybe she'd just been passing through. Maybe that evening had meant more to me than it had to her. That thought stung worse than I expected. Grandpa didn't say much either, but sometimes I caught him staring at the front window when he thought I wasn't looking. Polishing a cup far longer than necessary, his mind elsewhere. I knew he was thinking about the woman he had lost, the one Isla reminded him of so strongly. And I couldn't blame him. The way he said she looks just like her still echoed in my memory. We were in the middle of rearranging a shelf of rare jazz records, one rainy afternoon when the bell rang again. This time, it was her. Isla stepped inside with purpose, raindrops glistening on her coat, but her expression wasn't tentative like before. It was focused. She clutched something in her hand, a small envelope, slightly weathered. She didn't even take off her coat. She walked straight to the counter and pulled out a black and white photograph, laying it gently on the wood. The world fell quiet around us. It was a faded photo, edges curled with age, but the image was clear. A young woman standing in a sunlit garden, her hair curled at her shoulders, a light in her eyes that seemed familiar. Beside her stood a young man in a military uniform, gazing at her like she was the center of the universe. My grandmother, Isla said softly, touching the photo. Her name's Elsie. She lives in a care home now, in Brookvale. I showed her a picture of this place after I left the other night, and I mentioned a man behind the counter who looked shocked to see me. She swallowed, glancing between us. She got quiet for a long time. Then she asked me if he had kind eyes. Grandpa hadn't moved since she entered. Now his hand came forward, slowly, like he was afraid the photo would vanish if he touched it. He stared at it for what felt like a lifetime. That's me, he said finally, his voice rough and barely audible. That's Elsie. That was taken the summer before she got engaged. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of memories and regret and something else I couldn't name. Isla's eyes shimmered with tears she didn't try to hide. She used to talk about you, she whispered. She said you were the kindest boy she ever knew, that you played records for her after school and brought her coffee in cracked teacups, that you had music in your soul. Grandpa let out a shaky breath. We were kids. I thought I had time. She never forgot you, Isla said. Even now, sometimes she hums the songs you played. She told me she wished she could have danced with you just once, not in secret. My throat tightened. I could feel the weight of it, pressing down, 2 lifetimes folding over each other in this little cafe. That night, we closed early. The 3 of us sat in the back corner by the old turntable, wrapped in the soft crackle of vinyl and the sound of a storm tapping at the windows. Grandpa brewed tea in the dented steel pot he kept for special occasions, hands trembling slightly as he poured. Isla sat beside me, the photograph still on the table between us, like a ghost made visible. I didn't know she had family nearby, Grandpa said, his eyes never leaving the photo. She moved here when my mother was still little, Isla said, after her husband passed. She never remarried. She raised me, actually, after my mom passed away when I was 9. She told me bedtime stories, but they weren't fairy tales. They were about a boy who loved records and kissed her hands like an English gentleman, she said. I glanced at Grandpa, who chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. She used to come in every Thursday, he said. When I got new stock, I'd always set aside a copy of anything with a horn section. She loved horns, always said they made her heart dance. Isla laughed, and it was the same sound as her first visit, light, a little surprised. Like she wasn't sure she was allowed to feel joy in this moment. We should go see her, I said suddenly, the words spilling out before I could think. We should bring him. Isla turned to me. You'd want to? I looked at Grandpa, who hadn't taken his eyes off the photo. I think, maybe they both deserve that. Isla nodded, slowly, and smiled. It took a few more days to arrange. Isla visited the cafe twice more that week, each time staying longer. She'd help wipe down tables or bring in new flowers for the window ledge. One morning, she brought in a box of her grandmother's old records, dusty but intact. Grandpa spent hours sifting through them, naming each one like it was an old friend. There was something healing in the routine that developed. Not just for him, but for me too. Isla was easy to be around. Her presence filled the quiet without overwhelming it. She'd sit on a stool while I made coffee, sketching in a little pad she always carried. Sometimes she'd show me a delicate pencil drawing of a girl dancing among flowers, or a boy with a record player for a heart. We were falling into something. I didn't know what to call it yet, but I felt it. I saw it in the way she smiled when she caught me watching her, in the way she brushed her hair back behind her ear when she was nervous. And then, one crisp Saturday morning, we drove to the nursing home. Grandpa wore his old blazer, hair combed neatly, a bouquet of hydrangeas in his hands, Elsie's favorite, apparently. Isla sat in the back seat, hands clenched in her lap, her eyes on the road. I don't know what I expected, but when the door opened and Elsie turned her head toward us, her face changed. The years fell from her eyes in an instant. Leo, she whispered. Grandpa stepped forward. Hi, Elsie. I will never forget the way her hands trembled as she reached for him, nor the way Isla reached for mine, squeezing gently. It wasn't just memory they were touching. It was the years that could have been, and the ones that still could be. This morning, the cafe still smelled like cinnamon and espresso as we locked up early. Grandpa had barely touched his coffee, which was unusual. He always said there was no point talking about anything meaningful until the first cup was done. But today he just held it, hands wrapped around the warmth like it was anchoring him. We were quiet in the car on the drive to Brookvale, each of us wrapped in our own thoughts. Isla sat in the back seat beside a small portable record player and the worn vinyl sleeve of Ella Fitzgerald's Misty Blue. Grandpa had carried it out of his bedroom like it was something sacred, wiping the sleeve gently, like he was worried it might fall apart if he wasn't careful. She always said Ella made everything feel lighter, he murmured when I glanced at him. Isla smiled gently. She still says that. The nursing home was quiet when we arrived, low sunlight pushing through the sheer curtains in the lobby. A nurse led us down a hallway that smelled faintly of linen and lavender. Grandpa walked slowly, not from age but something more fragile, something hesitant. He clutched the record in one hand and smoothed his cardigan with the other, eyes fixed ahead. Her room was at the end of the corridor, half open. Isla paused before we went in, then looked at me, as if to say, this is real now. And it was. She sat in a chair by the window, wrapped in a pale blue shawl. Her hair was silver white, brushed neatly, and her gaze was distant, until Grandpa stepped inside. It was like a ripple passed through the room. Her eyes shifted, focused. Her fingers, resting lightly on the armrest, twitched. Slowly she turned her head, and when she saw him, really saw him, the smallest, gentlest smile rose on her lips. Not dramatic, not surprised, just known. She whispered his name, Leo. I watched Grandpa's hand tighten on the edge of the record sleeve. And then, just like that, the years seemed to fall away from both of them. He knelt down beside her, not minding his knees, and offered her the record without a word. I brought our song, he said. She reached out, not quite touching his face, but close, like she was reacquainting herself with the idea of him. We set up the player on the side table. Isla helped adjust the volume while Grandpa carefully placed the needle. The record hissed gently before the first notes rolled out, warm and familiar. The sound filled the room like sunlight spilling through the window, and I swear I saw Elsie's eyes shine just a little brighter. She closed them, resting back into the chair, and exhaled. There was no long conversation, no confessions, no tears, just the music, and the quiet understanding that some stories don't need to be rewritten, only remembered. I stepped back and found Isla beside me, her arms folded lightly across her chest. We stood in silence for a moment, just watching. I think they were in love, she said softly. I think they still are, I replied. She turned her face toward mine, and there was something in her expression I hadn't seen before. A kind of peace, maybe, or recognition, or both. And in that moment, with the music playing, the past and present folding over each other like pages in a worn book, I reached out and took her hand. She didn't pull away. We didn't say anything else that afternoon. There wasn't much to say. When the record finished, Grandpa kissed Elsie's hand and told her he'd come back soon. She nodded, not with sadness, but with the calm acceptance of someone who'd been waiting a long time and finally didn't have to anymore. Back in the car, no one turned the radio on. We drove through streets edged with early summer green, windows down, wind in our hair. Grandpa leaned his head back against the seat, eyes closed, a faint smile on his face. She still had the same laugh, he said after a while. Little quieter now, but it's hers. That evening, Isla and I walked down to the pier near her place. The water glimmered beneath the soft orange of a setting sun, and the breeze lifted her hair gently off her shoulders. We didn't talk much at first, just walked. Eventually she said, "Thank you, for today." I looked at her. For what? For being there, for letting him see her again. I think it helped more than either of them could say. I shrugged, a little awkward. They helped me. You helped me. She smiled again, the same one she gave me that first night, standing in our doorway like something out of a dream. Only now it felt even more real, grounded, earned. Since that day, things have unfolded slowly but naturally. We've started seeing each other more often. She stops by the cafe during her lunch break, sometimes with a new sketch, sometimes just to sit by the window with tea. We talk about our favorite records, books, movies, the way life feels when it loops around and surprises you with something good. Sunday evenings have become our tradition. We sort through the old vinyls together, cleaning the grooves and comparing cover art like critics. Grandpa joins us sometimes, telling stories between sips of coffee, and Isla sketches him when he isn't looking. And through it all, something soft and certain is blooming between us. Love didn't come crashing in like a storm. It walks beside us, slow and steady, with hands tucked in pockets and a warm drink in hand. Tonight, as I write this, she's sitting across from me in the cafe after closing.